Alright, no franchise retrospective of what the series means to the genre, no industry knob job to hype up the latest sequel, and no revisionist history on the legacy of the first film having single-handedly saved 90s horror. Any celebration of this film will be on its own merits, as it should be. This is The Mind's Eye, I am Inkarnate, you're watching the Scream 5 review, let's do this. If this movie's seemingly one and only trailer didn't spoil the beginning already, the opening scene is about as cyclically predictable of a starting point as you can get for a series that's supposed to not only be breaking the mold for the genre, but reinvigorating the franchise, one would think. You know the drill: Home Alone female, When a Stranger Calls, insert movie trivia, threat level escalates, familiarity sets in, white woman in trouble. Rinse, wash, repetitive. But what? Doth Mike Ice deceive me? The would-be victim from the opening scene, in a scary movie, survives? Whoa, man. They're not playing by the rules here, man. The final girl is now the first girl? They're just taking the whole playbook and throwing it right out the window. This ain't your daddy's Scream. No way. With shallow innovation like that, we're in for a real shill ride. If we could take a step back to that killer dialogue between killer and target, this exchange reads less like a stalker taunting their prey, and more like a Google search of the 5 most overrated, underrated horror films of the last decade that I can shoehorn into my slipshod script. That'll make for some awkwardly unnatural discourse. After all, I've got a deadline to meet, and I gotta binge watch that Squid Games that's all the kids are raving about. I gotta ask, did they honestly believe that name-dropping a short list of exaggerated also-ran films like Babadook, Hereditary, and It Follows would ingratiate fans to their righteous cause?
Very good, Lewis. Short but pointless.
Or did they reference these titles thinking that all the feels that fans have for those movies, for some reason, would transfer to this film? Just because they named them. Sticking up for the little guy. There's a new one. Acceptance by osmosis. Oh, but that insincere attempt at depth ain't half as flaunting as describing the plot of a stab movie as a veiled description of this movie's plot.
Avant-garde. Please, kill me.
They make sure to retain the clumsy killer trope and kick it into overdrive, so something old, something new, I guess. I'd like to point out that all this, and we're just in the opening scene. Fortunately, we've got sponsors to provide a brief intermission. If you're a frequent customer of Samsung the way that I am, you purchase everything from your TV and 4K players, from tablets and cell phones from the trusted brand. If you're already using Jabra headsets as your preferred audio tech provider, like I plan to very soon, then you know they provide a whole host of listening electronics ranging from workout earbuds, Bluetooth music headsets, and office hearing devices. If you use the link in the description for either Samsung or Jabra purchases, it'll help the channel out tremendously. With the promotional considerations accounted for, it's on with the show. Once we're introduced to our leading lady and sidekick, the attempt at establishing their characters falls apart as fast as John Cena's acting career. I've seen carnival performers on crutches less stilted than this conversation. Not to be outdone, once the toe tags, ensemble cast, is assembled, we're treated to Joss Whedon levels of charismaless banter. We've got stereotypical jock, which, even though is actually a first for the franchise, feels no less cliched. Oh, and his name is Chad, which won't be the last comparison this movie has to The Matrix Revulsions. Then there's unassuming teenager with frosted-tipped hair named Wes. Gee, is this an actual character, or another Hail Mary by the insecure writers to win brownie points with the audience? Stay tuned. We have diversity comedy relief who's painfully unfunny, an RBF who's as pasty as the Ghostface Killer's mask, and someone's girlfriend whose only outstanding feature is her hair color, because 2022. If you care in the slightest about movie roles that you actually care about, let me break the bad news bluntly. This movie prioritizes tropes of witty banter and pop culture references over crafting three-dimensional flesh and blood characters with genuine chemistry. Later on, when the adolescent meat sacks again congregate, there's this Megan's Law repeat offender looking prick that falls victim to douchehicular manslaughter because it's been 20 minutes, this is a brainless slasher film, and the movie needs a fresh murder to chalk up its kill count. His radio is playing that signature Scream anthem, Red Right Hand, that I started this video with because this film is determined on breaking the fourth wall with a sledgehammer if need be. Hey now, did I mention a franchise throwback? I won't spoil who it is, but let's just say one character gets a visit from Ghost of Franchise Past, which, okay Dexter, and all it does is remind me of when a film with the name Scream was actually good. But, you know, if you can't think of inventive ways of making your movie memorable, there's always a trip down memory lane. Gotta get those member berries in somehow. They explain this cameo with another showcase of expert Hollywood writing, with an exposition dump. Someone finds a diary that explains an entire tragic backstory.
Well, that's just lazy writing.
At the hospital, after this revelation is met with an exchange of awkward expressions by the two main actresses, once the killer makes a call, the film can't help itself and resorts to that, you know that part in horror movies, gag, to set up its next horror set piece, despite having already telegraphed it because that's how you weave together suspense. Predictability. Desperate for answers and intent on survival, what these human ciphers could use is a script doctor. No, not that one. They need not just a movie expert, but someone who's survived a scary movie before.
Special Officer Dookie reporting.
From the trailer park residents to the disheveled look due to onset alcoholism, this movie really wants you to care about Dewey, but I don't. In order to mourn a tragic fall from grace, I would have had to have given a damn from the jump. And if I didn't for the first 4 movies. So with ex-deputy Dewdrop on the case, we round up the walking obituaries for round 2, which undoubtedly also includes the murderer amongst them. Good thing that notion of the company of a killer is played for laughs, otherwise that'd come off as asinine. Since we've reunited these high school planks of wood, and none of them stand out, better call in a franchise callback to win back the audience goodwill, and oh thank goodness, the diversity comedy relief and football beefcake are niece and nephew to Jamie Kennedy from the first film. Phew, that was a close one. Yeah, this movie can't stand on its own. The preceding haranguing is without question the saddest attempt at satirical scripting I've ever witnessed. As diversity comedic relief takes center stage, I hear every mention of pandering possible from an approval-seeking writing team. Everything from the use of the phrase social commentary to horror movie bonding between parents and children?
What?
From references to Star Wars to verbatim remarks how, quote, the fan base goes nuts, end quote, when a franchise doesn't go their way. From the declaration that Jordan Peele is awesome, to the christening of this Part 5 entry as a requel. Get used to that unclever catchphrase. If there was a single virgin to be found in the audience, they would have been forcibly deflowered by how this film had just physically assaulted us with industry buzzwords. This monologue couldn't have been any more forced in your face than if Kim Kardashian was pretending to date it. This read like a thesis for a film studies class than verbal exchange in a movie, with all the appeal of a public lashing. How tone-deaf are these script writers? You can just hear these people slapping 5 in expectation that the rest of us will clap our flippers together over their community theater screenplay. They reference Psycho because, of course, they have to, right? Naming a classic means you did your homework even though you couldn't explain how you got the answer because that film is iconic and yours ain't. Okay, back to what this film refers to as a plot before I get sucked into this circle jerk. Oh no, that character I vaguely recall kicks the bucket. What's that? Kills in the daytime? 3 straight jump scare fakeouts? That there is some groundbreaking stuff. That there. What'd I tell you? You could say this movie's remaking the rules of scary movies. Uh-huh. The film mocks the 5th Stab film and the fact that the 8th was just called Stab.
Well, at least we can all agree the third one's always the worst.
My, what company you keep. They probably thought it could ride off the back of Halloween 2018, but that movie ain't nothing to ride home about. Since this movie pendulums between the hospital and someone's house, it's about time for a checkup. They head there to protect the girl almost killed in the opening, and ain't that job for the police? I get that 3 of these movies took place in Woodsboro, so the coppers are maybe skittish about serving at horror movie murder's capital. But the town of Kenosha had more police than this place. You're telling me this whole town has a handful of cops? When Ghostface shows up to hunt down 2 targets, there's a chase scene that is genuinely tense. That's made even better when the killer calls the leading lady and demands her to choose who lives, who dies. This is the first time that this felt like a Scream sequel, like a horror film, like a scary movie. The setup where the killer does the classic slow-moving slasher stroll, and yet keeps pace with his target, depicts Ghostface as a truly menacing figure. The goodwill this movie mustered is immediately squandered, ironically, when the heroes show up. What do I mean? Let's just say, don't bring a gun to a knife fight if you're going to use it at close range. It was at this point where it became abundantly clear that these aren't characters driving the story forward, they're husks reacting to what's happening around them. After the hospital hallway chase scene, this movie demonstrates actual brain activity, where at long last in a slasher movie, abandoning ship and getting the hell out of Dodge exhibits earnest nuance for the genre to branch out. This naturally gets immediately discarded in favor of stock standard formula of remaining in the same town with the killer any damn way. Well, the originality was nice while it lasted. Both seconds of it. And just where do the heroes head? Why, to a party, of course. And what's going on at that party? Why, a toast to Wes Craven. I know the movie wants you to think that it's saluting the character named Wes and not the deceased director/horror icon, but I would have to counter that with, what character? There are no less than 3 scenes that this forgery film plagiarizes from the original. Number 1, the beer basement scene. You know the one.
I see. Oh, you scared me too. Oh my god. Oh my god, please don't. Please. I'm just a day player.
In all seriousness, they have such a needlessly drawn-out, faux intellectual blabbering session between 2 characters that the film is too stupid to realize that they telegraphed that one of these was the killer, and it was obvious that it wasn't one of them. Because if it ain't one of them, then what's the point of the scene? Next up, you have characters arrive in a car after someone is skewered at the side of a house. And wouldn't you know, the whole time that guy was being chased, he had that trusty victim trips over nothing trope. But this time around, he's a male, not a helpless woman. Oh, very progressive. Lastly, I won't spoil where the party's taking place, but I will spoil what's taking place. They basically reenact the "look behind you" scene from OG Scream, recontextualized as a stab movie, where what's happening on the TV reflects what's occurring in the movie. I'm just left sitting there in stunned silence, thinking,
Why?
Diversity Hire has an obligatory lesbian scene to hit her trifecta minority mandate of female, black, and LGBT, fill in the rest of the alphabet. And oh yeah, the killer reveals themselves.
Ready for Act 3?
Since I had seen this actor's annoying performance in another film, and how they're just as grating in this movie, what acting range, I wasn't surprised by this twist. When the legacy characters show up, Sidney chastises the killer on how derivative they are for having picked a location for a killing spree similar to the first film. Have these so-called writers resorted to winking at the camera so much that they don't realize they're really rolling their eyes at their own lack of talent?
Come on. How meta can you get?
It's clear this movie is either on autopilot or achieved sentience, considering its engaged self-review mode, where it is instructing you, the audience, how you feel about it. In a movie filled to the brim with self-aware babbling, the finale is what wins the award for utterly hackneyed gibberish ejaculated at you rapid fire. As the baddie asks the question, "What's my motivation?" the answer is to make a good sequel. No, seriously. They philosophize with that age-old question, how can fandom be toxic? They pontificate over how Hollywood's out of ideas. Again, pot meet kettle. They go so far out of left field to validate this movie's existence by proposing to the audience that their movie has stakes, man. Anyone can die in the sequel. It's not just a run-of-the-mill cash grab, man. Yes, this is how our movie is epic, because this is how we's legit. I almost love this movie for how brazenly impudent it is, not to mention impotent. I think we're done here. Roll credits. These are the worst type of reviews for me to do because you should want a movie to do good. The problem lies when you need it to. If I can backtrack to the point that I closed my film's assessment on, and why wouldn't I be allowed considering this entire sequel is one colossal rewind, the need to validate this chapter of the franchise with the message of, you see who we just killed, so y'all know it's for reals, reeks of lacking confidence. 2022 apparently opened the way that 2021 closed, with a sequel to a 90s classic that is wrought with self-referential, pseudo-intellectual, and borderline narcissistic commentary that tells you how to feel about the movie you're actively watching. Yes, folks, Scream 5 is the Matrix 4 of this slasher franchise, and I called it. This is what you're supposed to think. Throw up a hashtag. Don't throw up in your mouth. Consume, comply, obey. These aren't characters. They ain't even caricatures. They're quotas. Names like Wes and Carpenter are meant to elicit Pavlovian clapping of your flippers like trained seals because that's what they think of you. They don't respect you enough to give you a gripping plot or engaging characters. The level of masturbatory arrogance is on such display. This film's dialogue plays as though the actors are reading the script to the audience. No, not rehearsing their lines, I mean straight up choreographing to the fans the itinerary of emotions you're supposed to be feeling. Insert dramatic effect, poetic license, franchise callback, pop culture reference, witty banter, wink at the camera, break tension with compulsory humor, nostalgia bait. It doesn't just break the fourth wall, it jumps the shark. Since Halloween made a comeback riding off the original Scream with H2O, Scream probably thought it could return the reach around by celebrating its 25th anniversary off the back of Halloween. H4O. It certainly ham-fistedly references that movie enough, much like how that soulless Invisible Man film was really a Hollow Man reboot rather than an H.G. Wells remake. This movie really comes off as more of a Scream 4 do-over instead of OG Scream sequel. It's funny, with all the checkboxes they continually tick off, they never give you relatable characters or an interesting plot. At least Scream 4 gave you a fan favorite out of the bunch with Kirby. This movie puts less emphasis on legacy characters, dedicating more runtime to the new roster, but it's time that's squandered because the fresh meat has gone ripe. These characters suck, so what's the point in dedicating screen time to them?
Oopsie doopsie, I muffed it up again!
While this movie busies itself with haphazardly throwing around buzzwords like Mary Sue and meta, here's a word for you: gatekeeper. You're not it. By bringing up quote-unquote toxic fandom, what they're really saying is, you better like this movie or else. Name-calling. Well, Inkarnate's the name and you can call me the real deal. You're telling me that you can't fairly evaluate a film from a genre that evaluates society for a film that evaluates the genre. And they actually bring up the Star Wars sequel trilogy as Exhibit A over how harmful a franchise's own followers can be? With The Last Jedi still fresh in people's minds? You sure that's the hill you want to die on? That level of out-of-touch self-importance is what did in Kevin Smith, and I can assure you, it can and will collect on your ass. Since you think you're all intuitive for speaking up for the genre when you talk down to its admirers, I'll speak on behalf of fans when you talk about how Hollywood sucks, because you're part of it. For those that staunchly defend this movie, you do realize that they're mocking you too, right? Their ridicule of current cinema is not a pervasive theme of the movie, it's a crowd sweetener. For you see, when they're disparaging modern horror's failings, they're simultaneously pardoning their own. Think I'm lying? Think they're on your side? And oh, the establishment reception. What did I just say about needing this movie to succeed? Horror media trying to embellish this film's box office, especially in comparison to Spider-Man? How about a sobering dose of reality since the aforementioned superhero film was in its 5th weekend once Scream 5 released? Cringe. You are absolutely welcome to buy the lie that this movie targets everyone, both film studio and fan alike, but if you're so easily conned by their imaginary take-no-prisoners approach, allow me to positively reference The Matrix and suggest that you free your mind. Scream is many things, but it was never condescending, especially to its own audience. This latest farce isn't a return to form, but rather a new low. As far as my final word on what I hope is the final nail in this series' coffin, all I can say is stab this.
Warn your friends. Warn everyone.